Welcome to another change-making conversation from Baptist News Global. You're listening to a special podcast series titled Highest Power, Church and State, featuring writer, poet, and musician Rick Pidcock. Now here's Rick.
Trump's war against China continues to rage as Democrats are starting to call it a game of red light, green light.
Donald Trump is now in retreat because Democrats in the Senate and the House and the American people have said, stop playing games with these tariffs. You think it's a game. You think it's like red light, green light. It's not, it's chaos. And the damage you have done already, despite today's announcement, is permanent and real and deep. You're throwing our whole economy out of kilter. You're telling business people and consumers to not spend because they don't know what the heck is coming out next. What you're doing, Donald Trump, is hurting the American people as you play games. Whatever pops into your head the next hour, the next day, the next week is what you say we're doing with tariffs. And they constantly contradict each other, make no sense, harm the American economy, and worst of all, American families.
You can't get an economy strong and moving forward when it's loaded with chaos and corruption. Investors will not invest in the United States when Donald Trump is playing red light, green light with tariffs and saying, oh, and for my special donors, you get a special exception.
Despite all the Democrats' recent flubs, the red light, green light analogy makes a lot of sense to me. If tariffs are our liberation, then why are they paused? Are the tariffs on, or are they off? Have they reached their ceiling, or will they be raised again? Are electronics given an exception, or are they not? It's enough to make your head spin. And often, in all the back and forth between two countries, two parties, or whatever is going back and forth in Trump's mind, what gets lost are the humans who are affected by it all. Scott Okamoto is someone who has felt the weight of this constant tension between the East and the West. He writes about his experience as a fourth-generation Japanese-American man in his book, Asian-American Apostate, Losing Religion and Finding Myself at an Evangelical University. So I sat down with Scott for an interview about how these major global conflicts affects him personally. It seems like there's always this tension between the East and the West. And I thought you would have a really unique perspective because you're kind of in both worlds. In particular, in your book, Asian American Apostate, you say, almost everything that happens to me, from the way I am perceived to the way I am treated, happens because I am a fourth generation Japanese American man. So I'd love to hear some more about that, especially given the fact that, like, whether we're talking about Japan or Vietnam or China, it seems like there's always some kind of major tension between the United States and the people in Asia.
Yeah. I mean, it's a long history in America, right? From the different exclusion acts. So to the Vietnam War, to Cold War, current war with China, war, trade war. So just, I don't know, just like personally, like how I've experienced that, like how I've
just
navigated.
especially being here in the United States. I know you talk some in your book about how, like, it's hard being, like, on one hand, you're a man, but on the other hand, you have your Japanese background too, and so you're kind of looked down on too, in a sense, often here.
Yeah, I'm never assumed to be American or like outside of California and the East Coast. Whenever I go, my wife's from Arizona, so especially in the 90s when we were like dating and early married, people would ask if I spoke English. It happens a lot in the Midwest. I haven't been to the South a lot, but I like to think it's better now. As things like BTS and Squid Game and have kind of elevated Asian identity a little bit in America, so we're not just seen as weirdo foreigner types as much. I'm not sure which is worse, being assumed to be a K-pop star or a weird foreigner with a camera. Neither of them are me, though. And so me, I was born, my dad was in the American Army, the U.S. Army, when I was born, and I was born at Fort Dix, New Jersey. So I'm like America's son in so many ways. I was raised hunting and fishing, and playing baseball, doing Boy Scouts. I was an English major in college. I became an English professor. But none of that is assumed when people see my face. None of the things I just listed about who I am, because I'm a perpetual foreigner and immigrant in the eyes of most of America, and especially the Donald Trump supporters assume I'm from China. That's the
Hmm.
default Asian, oh, Chinese, yeah, ching chong. They can't even get their racist jokes right. It's always like go back to China. So I think there's just always historically been a prejudice against Asian people because they there were arguments about whether Asians were even human. They're what's the term? Not mongoloid. It's but like monkey people is sort of how they were described and depicted during World War II. Even Dr. Seuss got in on it in his early days and made war propaganda against Japanese and depicted them as these kind of weird looking little people that couldn't be trusted. And so like really old people still kind of feel that way. If I see someone over 80 or 90, I'm a little wary. But like I said, I think things are better now as far as young people and as far as, you know, civilized parts of the country, somewhat educated parts. But in general, and Trump reflects this, Trump has never met an Asian person that he didn't ask where they were really from.
Hmm.
That joke on the internet, where are you from? No, where are you really from? I mean, that's an old joke that we've had since like the 80s. Um,
Hmm.
and when I was asked in the 80s, where are you from? I would say I was born in New Jersey, and I knew what they wanted. They go, no, no, like where you like, but where were you like? Yeah, I was raised in L.A. Oh, no, but like where are your parents from? Oh, my parents, yeah, they were both born in L.A. Actually, that's not true. They were born in internment camps, but um, they were born in America. And oh, what about your grandparents? Oh, my grandparents also born in Los Angeles. So I'm walking around this earth as a fourth generation American. But when I moved to an all white neighborhood, I was treated as a foreigner, as an immigrant. And I just accepted that because I guess that's, I look different than everyone. So I guess I'm different, And so it, I'm pretty sure my second grade teacher, when I first moved to Arcadia, California, this lovely old white lady, I was the first Asian person she had ever met in her life because she she thought I had mental deficiencies because I kind of talked like my black friends that I grew up with in Pasadena with this Asian face, and she was so confused. She couldn't understand what I was saying. She couldn't understand my idioms and my different linguistic quirks that I had developed on the streets of of poor parts of Pasadena, and they were going to put me in special ed. So, was I talking that much different than like TV characters in the 70s? No. But because this face was speaking this way, it the assumption was, oh, he's got learning disabilities. I forget what the term was in the 70s. And he's definitely, not from here. The Arcadia it was all white at the time. Interestingly, now Arcadia, California is all Taiwanese. There's a big demographic shift. And the mall that I got ching chonged at growing up is now like the Asian mall of the San Gabriel Valley of Southern California. So that's what I mean. Like things have changed and things have gotten better, but only for certain parts and only for certain demographics in this country. So if I go, like we like to take road trips, and my
Hmm.
wife is white, and so we cause all kinds of trouble. Like we were going through Cody, Wyoming, and with my kids, and people were just straight up mad dogging us in this little ice cream shop, like looking at my wife, white woman, looking at me, Chinese man, looking at my kids, half breed, you know, crimes against nature. And my daughter looked up and she's like, "What? Those people are looking at us weird." And I was like, "Oh, oh, yeah, they don't like that mean mom or violating eugenics laws or something. I don't know."
Yeah.
Um, And so it's still out there, and I'm conscious of it. And it even happens here in Southern California. Like people just don't assume I'm from here. I have a taco shop just a block away that I go to all the time. One time I walked in and there was kind of a line, and the older man at the back opened the door for me, which was nice. And he sees me, and then he puts his hands together and he bows like I'm some foreign person coming to, and he's like, "Welcome, welcome." And I know he was being nice, and so it's not like he was like violently or negatively racist, but he was positively racist. So I'm like, dude, I live right here. Like, I speak
Hmm.
Spanish to a woman behind the counter. I'm as Californian as you can get, and he's treating me like, I'm new to this neighborhood that I've lived in for 25 years.
Interesting.
So it's all levels from Trump down through society. Asians people are still not seen as American, and if they are, we're all assumed to be the big three: Chinese, Japanese, Korean, right? So
Hmm.
there's this thing called the model minority myth that's developed in the late 60s that the Asians are the good ones who get education and their kids are quiet and they're good at math. And um, statistically, I guess at the time that was true, but the government just used that as a wedge against communities and particularly against black and brown people. And so Asians were unwittingly used to sort of harm black and brown communities. Why can't you be like them? We stuck their asses in camps. They still came back and became educated. It's like,
Hmm.
no, that's not. It's not an inherent thing. Is like some people come here with more education, and then when you disaggregate the Asian identity, you've got Southeast Asian, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, among people who don't have a country. Um, you've got South Asian from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and so there's so many different kinds of Asian, but we're all just lumped together in this political thing. And I'm not against calling us all Asians by any means, because we need to band together for some kind of political voice. And that's just the reality. When a Korean person comes to America, they hate that they get lumped together with Japanese people. They don't like Japanese people.
Hmm.
Japan has done some really awful things throughout history to the Chinese people and the Korean people, Filipino people. I didn't mention the Islanders. The Islanders always get forgotten, and I just did that. And the Islanders were actually, there's a movement for the Islanders to separate and not be considered Asian and just be called Islanders. And I get it. I'm always trying to tell them we need to stick together, but they're like, no,
Hmm.
F all you people. You always forget us. And I'm just like, fair. So it's so complicated, right? When
Yeah.
you say Asian, I think everyone pictures like Panda Express or whatever, the Chinese restaurant down the street, maybe some sushi. Um, but there's so many identities and there's so many levels of culture. I used to say we're all Asian because we have black hair and we all eat rice and use chopsticks. And no, they don't all use chopsticks. A lot of them don't.
Hmm.
I don't use chopsticks all that often unless it's appropriate. But so yeah, so
Yeah.
throughout history, throughout culture, throughout politics, it's always a struggle I walk into every room wondering how people are regarding me. And when I was growing up, I learned this trick of I would make Asian jokes just to put white people or non-Asian people at ease. Say, I'm cool. I got a sense of humor. I speak English without an accent, and I'm okay. You don't have to worry about me. Um, as I got older, I started to be ashamed of that. I don't need to make fun of Asian people just to make people feel comfortable. It's like, so I got comfortable with their discomfort,
Yeah.
which was a very empowering thing for me to be able to do, especially when I was teaching at APU. I never tried to make people comfortable. No, interpersonally, yes. If I'm a friend of yours, they say something, kind of racist or just ignorant, cool. Here's what you just said, and we're good. But in a room, I'm not that concerned about um, how people regard me. Although I'm aware of it, I'm
Yeah.
aware of if someone says something to me, I know what that is. Or if they ask a dumb question or a microaggression, it's like I see that, I clock it, but it's not. It doesn't dictate how I feel about myself um, anymore. It did for a long time, but I'm old. I'm older.
Yeah. Do you feel like when these kind of bigger things are going on, like Trump talking about the China virus during COVID, or
Yeah.
now the tariff war, do you feel like some of these interpersonal situations um, maybe heighten more in your life?
I'm lucky to be in California, Southern California, especially. So it's out there. I have friends that have had encounters, just someone yelling out of their car, F you, go back to whatever, because, they're emboldened by the president of the United States now twice, being very anti-Asian. Yeah, I think if I lived, like, I have friends that are from the Midwest, and it affects their day-to-day lives for sure. Particularly, like during the pandemic, it was bad because, I had a friend whose husband got chased by a guy wielding an axe. And this is in Alhambra, California, which is like 50% Asian. So just because we live in sort of these enclaves and cities where, Asians might outnumber everyone else, we're still, like, to my earlier point, we're still not seen as American or people who belong here. So it just takes one crazy person who gets all fired up from a Trump speech, or not even Trump, a Marjorie Taylor Greene speech, or um, so even Rand Paul or Ted Cruz. It's like, yeah, they're giving people, their followers, the green light to at best see Asian people as weird and people who don't belong here, and at worst, people who need to be eradicated. And so, yeah, through my community, we see and hear it all, even in Southern California. But that said, I'm glad I'm in Southern California because
Hmm.
we outnumber a lot of people here. So there's some safety in numbers. It's like being an elk in a big herd. Yeah, the lion's gonna get a few of us, um, and we're gonna fight tooth and nail to save those people. But damn, it's like I'm really glad I'm not like we're not like the only Asian family in the whole neighborhood.
Yeah. I think like my experience growing up in the United States, like Asia was always seen, anytime it came up in my mind, it was always in terms of missions.
Yeah,
Growing up in evangelicalism, and like we always knew of missionaries that would go to Japan or China was basically what it was,
yeah,
and we would assume they were always sharing the gospel and making converts. But like now that I've grown up and kind of seen a bit more of how the white evangelical machine works, like what a lot of people assume to be missions is can really be thought of in terms of imports and exports of culture. And so
yeah,
like a lot of missionaries could be exporting Christian nationalism, male patriarchy to some of these places. And I'm just curious, like what kind of effect that might have on these various Asian cultures when white Americans are exporting their power hierarchies.
yeah. China isn't as patriarchal as Japan, so there's a distinction there. Interestingly, Japanese by and large reject Christianity just straight up. Just what's the statistics? It's like 1% Christians. It's
Hmm.
only the crazy Japanese people who are a little bit unhinged, who convert to Christianity.
Hmm.
Um, uh, they have a little more success in China, but you're right, and I've heard this criticism of the missionary complex, of and it depends on which denomination too, right? And so, yeah, so by and large, what they're exporting and what they're converting people to is Western American thought, right? Whether it's democracy, that used to be part of the curriculum in like the 70s and 80s, for China. I know the people who started ELIC, the big English Language Institute of China. That was their tent making strategy. We can't, because you're not allowed to be a missionary in China, so you have to go over as an English teacher. And the Chinese were so desperate to learn English, they knew what was happening, but they're like, all right, well, if you're teaching English, you can you can be here.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and so you're absolutely right. And when you say they're exporting just even Christian nationalism, and the people that I know who have come to America who became Christians through missionaries, like I said, they're just weird. They're people who are kind of lost. I feel like because they're told to like give up their culture. You know, in Japan, Shinto and Buddhism are the two kind of, and they're not even like religions as we understand it, but like philosophies, ways of living. They have to give that up, and that is so deeply ingrained in a Japanese person. They don't go to church, they don't go to temple necessarily. Some do, but it's so, because it's such a homogenous country, everyone knows what you mean when you talk about Shintoism and Buddhism. And some follow one more than the other, some follow only one, not the, but they all know what it is because it's so ingrained in the culture and it's such a homogenous culture. Kind of like how Christianity is in America, although I think because our education is so bad, I don't think most Trump followers could tell you one thing Jesus said.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, you're right. They're exporting that, and then and to me that makes them like it's not viable. It's not a viable life to stay in Japan and be a Christian because no, the Japanese are very polite and they're not going to like kick you out, but you're going to be weird if you're a
Hmm.
Christian in Japan. You're going to be an outcast socially. If you're constantly talking about Jesus and inviting people to Bible study in church, you're not going to be very popular. You're going to be like that Amway salesman who's just always trying to sell stuff to people, and people are going to be kind of like keeping you at a distance. That's why I met the weird ones. And so, because I taught at Azusa Pacific, you read my book,
Yeah.
and I had a lot of international students, and man, those Asian kids were weird.
Hmm.
Because I know people from China and Japan, and they weren't that. Something about Christianity did something to their brains and to their minds, and so I didn't get along with them. They were very disappointed in me because I tell jokes and I talk about controversial things, and that was not okay for them. They came to my class all hoping that they would, oh yeah, his name's Okamoto, so he'll be cool to me. And it was just like, nah, we don't get along. We don't connect at all.
I
And
wonder
that was
if,
even when I was Christian.
yeah. I was gonna say, I wonder if like going to this export thing, because like Christianity in America is very white supremacist. It's a majority. It's domination. And yet it has a persecution complex, and they think they're marginalized. And so you
Yeah.
export that into a place where a Christian would actually be marginalized.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if that plays into some of the disconnect there.
Yeah. I think that's definitely the strategy. Like when you go to like Africa and, poorer countries. It's a hard sell though, right? Because Paul's always talking about being persecuted. You're
Hmm.
blessed when you're persecuted. Be proud. It means you're doing the right thing. That's how I was taught. And I'm looking around and as a kid in suburban America, like, yeah, there's not a lot of persecution. You kind of go looking for it, right? You got,
Hmm.
like, oh, this kid was mean to me at lunch. There it is. I'm
Yeah.
persecuted. Yeah. And so now that they've got political, because I grew up in the 80s as a kid, and Christians were just starting to their ascent into the government, with Dobson making the deal with Congress, and we get this religious right wing with Reagan. Um, and now that they pretty much run, you have to be Christian to be in government, at least say you are, in most of the country. And so they've got political power now. So now, if if they're feeling persecution, they have to like tie themselves in knots saying, oh, the government is here to take away prayer in schools and take the Bible out of schools and make everyone get abortions. And Yeah, but they're the government. So what do? They target trans people this time. In the past, it was gay marriage and or people who are Muslim. It's like there has to be some kind of boogeyman out there, so they can claim persecution. And it's always the godless liberals, who they outnumber greatly. So yeah. So a quick story. When I was at APU, it during one of the elections, they did a poll, and they found out the school was 85% Republican. Not surprising. And that included professors, I think, the staff, and the students. But there was always a couple of professors or a couple of students who would speak up and like push back. And this group called the Conservative Voice, because they needed a club because I guess the school was not conservative enough, started claiming that the school was turning Marxist. They went straight to Marxism. They couldn't tell you what that was, but they knew that was not a good thing at their school. So just a couple of single voices speaking out in classes, a couple of professors speaking up, felt like oppression to them. Oh no, we're losing the school to the godless liberals, because even though they outnumbered them, 85% to whatever. Uh, the other 15% were not necessarily Democrats. Some people were just so Christian that they didn't identify with the party because their church taught them that was like heretical or something. So I would have guessed it was maybe 10% Democrat that year. Obama kind of shifted things, and people maybe it was 20% Democrat. But still, for the whole time I was there, Republican people and conservative people far outnumbered everyone else. And yet they felt persecuted when someone just dared ask a question or dared to push back.
Yeah. I interviewed at Mary Lee Ma a couple years back for an article, and she was talking about the um the experience of Christians in China who are more marginalized there than they would be here in the United States.
Yeah.
And she said that a lot of people there actually, with the exportation of American Christianity there, like a lot of them are obsessed with Trump. And they love how Trump stands up to the Chinese government, and they long for this like future Chinese Christian civilization that maybe Trump could help bring about. Like, so I don't know if
Wow.
it doesn't seem in the way you describe the Christian minority in Japan that would be there, but I'm wondering like are there other areas there that have this fascination with Trump that um may have
Yeah.
some political, I don't
I'm
know, stuff
laughing
to it.
because I just saw I think it was a comedian who looked, and I looked it up, and I think it's partly true. She said the reason Japan doesn't hate Trump, because not if they knew what he was saying, so no one in Japan speaks English. Like literally, there's very few people. They can read it a little bit, and if you go to Japan, there's signs in English, but like when you go to Japan, it's very limited.
Hmm.
You find someone that speaks English, it's like, wow, that's amazing. So apparently, when his speeches are translated or his interviews are translated, they're very polite, and so it's not a literal translation. It's kind of a cleaned up translation,
Interesting.
and so they don't quite get the hate, the vitriol, the stupidity, the lack of ability to form sentences. They don't get that. So when the translators translate what he's saying, it sounds normal and it's cleaned up. And so, yeah, but most of Japan doesn't like Trump. So it's, yeah, the Chinese thing is chilling, right? Because I get it. If you feel oppressed in China and you're living in a communist area that's more common. I don't know if everybody knows about how China is now, but it's like democratic and communist depending on where you are. Um, if you hate your government and you see some white savior standing up to them, then I guess you might be. But I don't know if you know what the numbers are of like how many people are Christian in China. It can't be that much.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Actually, they probably can't know because they'd be in trouble.
Yeah,
Is it
it's probably
still
not
not?
tracked.
Yeah, and it's probably not still not okay to be Christian in China, culturally or politically. So yeah, that's a good point. And this conversation that we're having, I'm having a hard time finding words. Not many people are having this conversation,
Hmm.
and so I really appreciate you asking, and because and I'm not an expert in international relations and between Asia and America. I've just lived this life and observed these things.
Hmm.
So yeah, so when I went to Japan, the only time I went to Japan was 2017, shortly after he took office. And we got off the train in Tokyo somewhere, and there was a group of like 8 or 9 old people with signs that said Japan loves Trump. They were trying to have a rally, and I don't even know why. Nothing was happening, but nobody paid any attention to them. People just walked. So there's this person with a megaphone saying something in Japanese about their love for Trump, and they're holding these signs, and nobody even looked at them. It wasn't like they hated them or loved them. It was just like, what the hell are you doing? And just walk past them. And so that was the only like thing reference to Trump that I saw in the 2 weeks I was in Japan. Was it this little? It wasn't even a big subway station, train station. It was like a minor one. And yeah, I don't. Japan has its own problems, and now we're causing them. So I'm sure Trump is not super popular in any of the age. So have you seen that picture of the leaders of China, Japan, and Korea all shaking hands, doing this sort of like bro?
No.
All of us are buzzing about that. All of us in my Asian American community here in LA. Like, do you know how bad you have to be to unite those three guys who would
Hmm.
willingly take a picture and touch each other and make deals together? They hate each other.
Hmm.
There are centuries of bad blood and war atrocities and it's mostly Japan. I'm Japanese, I can say it. Japan is mostly guilty of most of the things. But the fact that those world leaders met, made plans, and took a picture, a loving bro picture, in 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 solidarity against Trump, that should make Americans really worried,
Yeah.
be- because that is a lot of people, there's a lot of money, and a lot of not necessarily, well, China has a military, but yeah, that's it's not good. We united mortal enemies because of Trump. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. And Europe's doing the same thing, right? So
Yeah.
good times.
I was as people are having conversations about this kind of stuff, like one thing I've noticed in the progressive space a lot is that a lot of people, like white people, when they start listening to non-white voices, they tend to start listening to black voices or
Hmm.
Hispanic voices,
Hmm.
which is, definitely good, especially given our history with those communities.
Yeah.
But maybe I've misread the situation, but it seems to me like less people are interested in listening to Asian voices.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any experience with that or like,
Yeah. For sure. I rub shoulders with a lot of my friends who have platforms, and I'm always the lowest one.
hmm.
uh, I'm used to that. On my podcast, Chapel Probation, if I go through the analytics and I have an Asian guest, that episode gets 20 to 30% fewer listens, pretty consistently. Um, I just think America's default setting is that Asians don't have anything to say. We're the worker bees. We're the math whizzes. We're the people in cubicles crunching numbers, and we're hard workers. But we're not visionaries. We're not seen as people who will lead anything. Um, so yeah, and to be fair, there aren't that many Asian American voices in the conversation, because I think we grow up kind of being told that we shouldn't speak up in a lot of ways, whether that's a cultural thing or just this recognition that no one's listening. Um, So there's a lot of social forces. Like the Brad Onishis of the world are rare, who has a huge platform and is doing great things. I can't think of another in deconstruction, another voice with that big of a platform.
Mm-hmm.
Can you? Because
I
I'm drawing
mean,
a blank.
yeah, I can
I
think
know
of
some
some.
religious people.
Yeah, I can. I was thinking of some seminary professors in more progressive spaces, but
Yeah,
um,
but there's not an equivalent of um, like Jamar Tisby or
mhm.
Tim Whitaker or people like that. We're not, and I would even say like Hispanic people get ignored too. I think it's the Christian world is a black and white world. It's
Mhm.
when they say diversity, most of the time they mean black and white. Some will even just say black and white. And so, yeah, I think Hispanic people and Asian people get a little bit left behind. And ironically, there are a lot of Hispanic voices out there, but not so much in deconstruction. So,
Yeah.
it's how long have we been doing this evangelical deconstruction thing? At most 7, 8 years.
Mhm.
So, um, yeah, we'll see. It's growing. You're talking to me, man. So I think you're you're doing your part.
Getting there.
And I'm going to have you on travel probation this season. So I'm
Yeah.
starting up season 5. So because you went to a illustrious college.
Yeah, with its own racial, interesting past. So, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your perspective, and I think it's important to hear your voice, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts with us.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Rick. It's always good talking to you. You're doing great work. So keep it up, man.
One thing I've noticed as we've discussed the effects these wars have on society is that we tend to talk about the financial implications, how it affects the stock market, our 401ks, or the cost of living. But Scott's experience shows us the effects on other parts of our humanity besides our pocketbooks. It affects human dignity, because it leads white Americans to look down on others of a different race and ethnicity. So, as we examine the effects America First tariffs have on our money, let's do so, but without forgetting that the true worth of the humanity of those involved doesn't go up and down based on the market or on the back and forth whims of Trump's mind. There is no hierarchy when it comes to human dignity and loving one's neighbor as self. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and rate us on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll be back with another episode on Thursday.
This has been another change-making conversation from Baptist News Global. The episode you've just heard is part of a special podcast series titled Highest Power, Church and State. Be sure to follow BNG daily at baptistnews.com and subscribe to get notifications about future episodes. Baptist News Global is a national nonprofit news service that is independent, free, and faithful. BNG is supported by readers and listeners like you. Learn more at baptistnews.com.